Hello and welcome to Daily Politics, reaching you from Trust TV here in Abuja. On this program, we discuss issues around politics, policy, and governance. I am Suleiman. Today, our focus is on the politics of fuel subsidy in Nigeria. It's an issue which has dominated the news throughout this week. And in general, fuel subsidy is a stubborn policy issue that hangs around the neck of every government since 1999. It also has a wide-ranging economic, political, and even social implications for Nigeria and Nigerians. Indeed, anything to do with fuel is really the pulse of Nigeria and Nigerians. Subsidy for many Nigerians have said that the subsidy is laden with a lot of fraud. Critics say that the fraud is evident at every point in the value chain, from the total number of consumption of what we consume in liters to the total number of what is even imported in the first place. Indeed, no less than President Muhammadu Buhari at one time described this fuel subsidy as a fraud. He said, very popularly, as every Nigerian will recall, that who is subsidizing whom? He did say that. And today we're asking that and many other questions because the issue of fuel subsidy remains contentious as ever. Early this week, the federal government announced that subsidy will stay. This is barely 2 months after the same government said it will completely remove the subsidy on refined products in the country. Meanwhile, our refineries are grounded at ground level zero in terms of production. So we are asking, why is subsidy even difficult for a president who said it never existed? And two, perhaps even more seriously, who is actually subsidizing whom in Nigeria? Are we subsidizing the importers? Or is the government that is subsidizing us? Who is subsidizing whom? We feel that that question is still relevant. And with me to distill this issue today are two people in the know of the subject. Engineer Muazzu Magaji Dan Saraunia is an oil and gas engineer, a politician, and a former commissioner for works and infrastructure in Kano State. Also with me is Malang Ahmad Sajo, a chieftain of the APC, a public affairs analyst, and former commissioner of the information in Adamawa State as well. Welcome to Daily Politics, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us. But before we continue, we'll take a minute and then we'll return, a short break, and then we'll return. Stay tuned. Welcome back. This is Daily Politics, and now we get into the discussion proper about the politics of fuel subsidy. So I go straight into the discussion, engineer. Some maybe Nigerians who are in their 20s now, who probably will be voting more in large numbers in 2023, they will have been hearing fuel subsidy throughout their entire lives, in a way that older generation of Nigerians like yourselves would not have been hearing until the period between 1999 to date, because in the 80s and 90s there were issues about fuel subsidy, but they were not everyday issues that we now see today. So what's really going on with fuel subsidy? How do we explain it to this younger generation of Nigerians?
Thank you very much, Doctor, and good to have us here.
Thank you.
Look, the issue of subsidy simply means that government is putting money to discount the price of petroleum product, specifically applied to petroleum product. Subsidy can be on any other product, agriculture, on other productive sector. Now, in this respect, because we are unable to refine our crude oil, which is unfortunate, which is the fundamental problem in the first place, we have to import. So we do what's called either swap, or we sell the crude oil, get the dollar, and then go to refineries outside and buy product and bring it for consumption. Now the problem here is that because Naira is weak, and also the cost of production and the cost of crude oil, if you factor all of that, the cost per liter a petroleum product arrive Nigeria at a certain price, what is called landing cost. It lands in the port. At port, it comes at a cost.
So what's that cost today?
Today, approximately landing cost of petroleum per liter is about 286 naira.
Okay.
If you bring it inland, there is transportation cost. Put together, you can get a petroleum product per liter in Abuja at about 295 to 300
per liter
in a commercial environment. If you add profit, it gets to about 320, 350. This is dependent on three factors, like I said. The cost of crude per barrel, the cost of dollar, which you use to import to buy the product, and also the logistics involved.
So to look at the cost of crude per barrel, does it mean that if the cost is higher, then the landing cost and the sale will be higher, and
correct,
therefore
because
the subsidy will be higher
higher because the refineries are buying crude at higher cost, and therefore they have to sell their product at higher cost. Now, all of this means that if you are going to allow market forces to dictate the cost of petroleum product, Nigerians will be buying today at about $90 per barrel, a liter of petroleum at about 350.
Interesting. So, Malam Ahmed, does it then mean that because in 2014 there was this idea that there was a crash in the price of crude oil in the country, and that crash led to in the international market, which led to even the crash in Nigerian economy, and correct, later on even recession, even before the pandemic, even many states could not pay. So does it now mean that a higher price of crude oil is actually bad thing for Nigeria, or what does it mean, the situation
I think we are caught in a web.
Okay.
In the first instance, because our economy is dependent on a monoproduct, oil,
okay,
to a large extent.
Okay.
All talks about diversification have not actually yielded the desired
results.
Because we are dependent on that mono product for our economy. The higher price of crude oil is a joy for us as a government, because government gets higher earning. But when it increases the landing cost of petroleum products in our markets, it represents again another tragedy for us, because it then means that we either open up the market and allow our people buy petroleum product at particularly PMS. I don't think diesel is subsidized. Okay. Either people buy PMS at a higher cost, or we take part of the money we make from the higher cost of selling crude oil to reduce to control the price of PMS to a level that we think is convenient for our people.
For most people to be
able to buy. Because of the spiral effect. If you increase the price of PMS, transporters will increase the price of their vehicles,
their services,
then their services, and then the market people will increase the prices of so there will be a spiral effect in terms of inflation. But don't forget that there are certain costs that are fixed.
Okay.
Your salary as a labor is fixed by government.
So even if the price of fuel increases, my salary will not increase at the same time.
So it doesn't also affect certain aspects of our lives to the extent that you can adjust. Assuming the product you have to sell, which is your labor, can also be quantified in terms of either the price of the dollar or the price of crude oil or the price of you won't even question it. Assuming they say for every increase in the price of liter of PMS, the salaries will increase. I tell you, no worker will go on strike.
People will be happy with that situation. But among the things
people may not be happy, not necessarily happy. But I am telling you that on one end is a factor that is unpredictable.
Okay.
But then on the other end is a factor that is certain and fixed. So that is where the confusion comes in.
Thank you. So one of the issues you mentioned is the foreign exchange, the cost of the dollar. Most Nigerians many people will not understand how the cost of dollar has
Effects.
any business with fuel subsidy or the
Correct.
linkage between the two. Can you
Correct.
speak a bit more on that?
So this is the linkage. Usually you purchase this product per tonnage. That is 1,000 metric ton or 100,000 metric ton.
So how does that translate to in liters?
In tonnage means if you go to the petroleum global market,
Okay.
it simply means that you are buying 1 ton of petroleum product at X amount of dollar,
Okay.
not in naira. If the crude oil price go up, the cost of this 1 ton goes up, and the higher the dollar you buy, the more dollar you actually use to buy this product, and when you come back home, you have to recover that dollar in the price. So that's why the landing cost is affected by dollar as well. Now, if dollar is weak, it simply means you have to put a lot of naira to get the amount of dollar for 1 ton of metric ton of petroleum product, which means the naira is weaker and you are spending more naira, and therefore when you bring it, you have to charge more to recover that naira that you put in.
So the higher the exchange rate between naira and dollar, the higher, sorry, the
cost.
higher the
weaker the naira,
the weaker, okay.
the higher the price of petroleum product.
Okay.
Because you have to put a lot more naira to buy a certain ton. And when you come to sell, you have to recover that naira. And also, that is influenced by the cost of crude oil as well. So crude per barrel, the dollar, and the logistic cost. That all add up. Now, all of this thing we are talking about means that we are actually, like he said, selling crude oil, using the same crude oil to now subsidize consumption.
Our own local
Consumption. Now think about it. Had it been we are able to refine the crude at home, there is what is called value chain in the crude. The opportunity of refining 1 barrel, you bring out many different products at home. You sell it at home. And you do not have to bother about this dollar weakness.
Because everything will be, all transactions will be done mostly in naira.
Employment due to the activity of refining will increase wealth, will create jobs. And also, you have not lost the money, because when you buy from Ukraine or from United States or from Middle East, you actually take your own crude oil money and give it to somebody.
And you're getting less value for it.
You get less value for it.
In that case, he's describing an El Dorado, that more or less, that if we are refining petroleum products, crude oil at home, it will be more or less a heaven for Nigeria in terms of the contribution to the economy. Exactly why have we not been refining at home? Why?
I think you may not have understood him very well.
Okay.
What he is trying to tell you is that presently we are operating in 2 markets that are using 2 different currencies.
Okay.
That's where the confusion is actually is. You're operating in a market that operates purely in dollar. Then you're coming here to operate in another market that operates in naira. So any crisis with the exchange rate between the 2 currencies will definitely affect your market at home, because that's the one that links up with your people. Now, the petroleum industry generally, with due respect to my brother here, is one of the most opaque industries we have in this country.
Okay.
You cannot pinpoint, facts as they are anywhere, within the...
For example, the number of liters that we consume in the country.
Nothing.
Nobody knows.
Even the status of our refineries. Why are we putting in... But in fact, why do the refineries exist? Because they are very big industries. They employ a large number of people. The cost of maintenance, the cost of labor, the cost of overhead, staff salaries, and it's going on every day of every year in this country.
Very interesting.
Yet
they are not refining.
They are not refining. They are not doing anything, and we're not looking at them from that perspective. We're looking at them from the perspective of national assets of very little value, if any. You know,
or
other
national
than
liabilities rather.
Well, we see them as national assets. That's why we're maintaining them. We see them as liability. We would have gotten rid of them.
So if we have 4 refineries, and every month we're paying salaries to go and work on them, and every now and then we take billions of dollars to even do something called turnaround maintenance.
Yes.
You know, as you see, only last year the federal government budgeted 1.5 billion for the Port Harcourt and Kaduna refineries, I think, or only for the Port Harcourt refinery. So if you have these as assets in quotes, and yet they are not able to actually refine petroleum products, you know, as a technical person who worked in Shell for years, what does that mean? Are they assets or liabilities to the nation?
So the question I will ask you is, if you're a businessman and you have 4 refineries and they're supposed to produce petroleum product for you to sell to the market, and they're not producing, and you have to go and buy from foreign refineries to supply to your...
Or close them down, to answer your answer.
Simple.
Sell them off or close them
These
down.
are refineries that have become basically a drain hole on our economy.
Interesting.
For decades, these refineries have been operating at suboptimal level and to a point where they got grounded. 3 factors. 1, they are old.
Okay.
2, there is a fuel cabal.
Okay.
These cabals, we have to face them. Importation of generator, importation of diesel, and then the importation of petroleum product in the subsidy scam that you're talking
So the
about.
3 work in hand.
They work hand in hand.
Those who import generators and those who import fuel, they
work hand in
serve
hand.
the same interests.
Correct. And then they reach out to NNPC people who manage these refineries. Believe me, you will not believe this, to a level where people are paid to sabotage these refineries not to work.
Interesting.
As Nigerians, as staff of NNPC, today the fluid catalytic cracking unit, the most expensive unit in the refinery, will just explode because somebody left the parameters unattended that are supposed to be controlled. They know it, they will leave it. A boiler will just burst or a heat exchanger will just burst. Now, every day there is pipeline problem, boiler problem, heat exchanger problem, vacuum distillation unit, fluid catalytic unit. Every day there is one problem or the other. Now, so even the NNPC staff themselves, they have turned it into a milking cow. They take salaries without production, and turnaround maintenance money is paid on a moribund refinery that's not producing. You could see even the NNPC themselves, they have turned it into some sort of milking cow.
Is it possible then to describe these assets, these NNPC, I mean these refineries, to describe them as private property in the actual sense of the term? You know, rather than public property.
No, they're public property.
The reason why this question is important, in 2019, when one of the presidential aspirants, or candidates in fact, of the PDP, Vice President Atiku Abubakar, he said he was going to sell off the refineries. People thought that he's selling our public property. But the descriptions, the sense I get from what the two of you are saying is that these are in fact, you know, private properties in all but name only. So are they private properties or public properties?
No, I think let us also look at the trust deficit within the system.
Okay.
The national assets that were sold in the past, what became of them? The fear is that, you know, people who are propertied in this country will put up our national asset for sale. They will sell them out at very cheap prices. And instead of managing them in such a manner that will be productive in the interest of the people, these same people who bought them will look for areas of them that they could sell off to recover their money. Once they recover their money, they abandon the national asset to lay waste. So over time, people have come to realize that the whole selling of assets is a scam. You know, it's not to make them more productive. When they sold Ajakuta, they sold Ajakuta to people who came and picked those aspects of Ajakuta that of value and sold them out and left the carcass of the company lying there for So we are really afraid that if you sell those things, who are you selling it to? For what purpose? Will it make them, be more effective? Have the past sales you have made, we're still fighting with discourse. Till today, we're not getting electricity because we have sold discourse. What they did was to look for landed property, to look for some equipment within the discourse that they bought, sold them out, recovered their money, and now we are stuck with no electricity. So there is a lot of trust deficit between us and the managers of our economy.
And
but
privatization generally.
The truth about it is that there is still no commitment or political will to make the refineries function. They can function. We can also be a little bit more transparent, more open, more accountable in the manner we run our petroleum industry. We are not accountable now. We are not transparent. We are not open. It's very opaque. We don't even know what is going on. Nobody knows, like you said, nobody knows what is our consumption.
That's precisely where I was going, to come back, because part of the problem, if you look at the fuel subsidy issue, has been, growing gradually until it gets to a point where we can now say clearly, in all honesty, that it has gotten out of hand. And it was always based on the number of liters, the total number of liters we consume in the country, therefore the total number of liters imported, right? And then on how much you have per liter that the government pays as subsidy higher and above what we pay at the pump, right?
Correct.
So how do this data, or the lack of this data, or the opacity that he is saying, how do they inform the situation? Because the government is now saying that for this year alone, there will be 3 trillion naira.
Spent on subsidy, yes.
Spent on subsidy. That's about $1.5 billion US.
Correct.
It's
okay, so
it's not small money anywhere in the world.
The sad thing about this discussion was that the PDP administration was accused of exactly this problem, and we promised change.
Okay.
This issue of subsidy requires just a simple decision.
Okay.
Either you fix your production capability at home, so
that the refining capacity,
or get private sector to set up a refinery and buy crude at home at production cost plus small margin, not at international price, because you're actually doing what's called subsidy at source.
Okay.
Now, that will be passed to the people at a lower price. The problem here is that when the government came in and said, I will stop this scam, when you just cited Mr. President's statement on the subsidy, the political will required to stop the subsidy when we came in will have manifested in the early part of our administration, because people were willing to make the necessary sacrifice at that point, because they trusted that Mr. President have the integrity, have the passion for the people, and will not harm the people, even if he increased the price. What is increase in price? What is subsidy? There is a word that describes all of this: deregulation.
Okay.
We just started this program and we said diesel is not subsidized. People are still buying diesel. That capacity to bring in diesel in a free market that remove this subsidy,
but some people
could have been the same thing with petroleum product.
Some people would say that diesel does not have the same multiplier effects on the economy in a way that PMS petrol does, because
but do you know what could have happened? Do you know what could have happened?
Fuel that people use on day-to-day basis.
Yeah, but do you know what could have happened?
I'll come back to you.
No, I want to tell you what could have happened.
I think it's important.
What could have happened would have been, you remove the subsidy, people trust the government that the money removed from the subsidy will be used in their own interest. That is very important. Then local production will have manifested. Then the price will have stabilized itself and competition will bring down prices. These are policy decisions we have because other people in our own government also plug into the subsidy space. The political will to remove it. Other people have special interest. I've told you there are importers of diesel, importers of generators, power sector, and all the other people. The problem is when we came in to change the space, the first person we left intact was CBN governor. That's the supervisor of everything. If we wanted to change economic and policy direction,
the CBN governor, what would that have done? Because he's not involved in refining. He's not involved in buying and selling.
Who is paying the dollar? Who is actually subsidizing this import? Who is paying for M? Who is actually providing that dollar which is used to import this product? It's CBN. There is something called joint venture dollar. It's managed between NNPC and CBN. My brother, the greatest favor, the greatest patronage, the greatest opportunity. Listen to me. We need to address this very important.
Please.
We have failed in our commitment and promise for change.
When you say we, do you mean the APC
government of
or
APC
the PDP?
today?
Okay.
I am APC,
yes.
and I'm saying we failed in meeting our commitment for change. Because change means changing the way things are done. This is 7 years we're discussing subsidy as if we were in PDP administration.
Exactly.
My brother, this requires political will, and it requires passion for the people. Explain what you want to do, take measures, and also, remember, we also promised to fix the refineries. We also failed there. Subsidy removal, we couldn't implement it. Refining the product, we couldn't do that. We allowed people who were managing this economy in PDP, with all the complaining people were doing, to still manage our economy.
A lot of people would say that this is deflecting the argument from the PDP, from one person only, who was appointed by a previous administration, a PDP government, and who still serves at the will of the APC government. You know, that's the people will say that's a way of deflecting blame from the self, you know, to other people, in order not to, for the APC not to accept responsibility. What do you think about that? Even though you're APC yourself.
Let's look at it very closely.
Yes.
What we're talking about is that there was and there still is a subsidy cabal.
Okay.
What they did then and what they're doing even now is that one tanker of refined petroleum product coming to Nigeria may just move from port to port and receive all the papers for subsidy payment on one tanker load of product 2, 3, or 4 times, which was what was actually our complaint against the past system.
The PDP, yes.
The past system.
Yes.
Now, have we been able to remove that? I believe we have not.
Yes.
That's why the subsidy thing lingered. And what my brother is telling you is that if at the time we came in as a government, we said, look, enough of that. We're deregulating the downstream sector. We're allowing market forces to determine. By now, everything would have stabilized. That's number one. 2, if we had fixed the refineries, 3 trillion, I don't know, I'm not a petroleum person, he's the petroleum person, but I think 3 trillion would have fixed all our refineries and, you know, made a production here.
Absolutely.
He made a statement that is very germane. Let's look at it this way.
Okay.
If we had been producing our requirements back home,
yes,
apart from the added advantage that refining the crude comes with other value-added products that the refineries could sell and make money, we could have decided to subsidize it at the level of crude acquisition.
Yes.
The ordinary man in the street will not even know that there was a subsidy at that level. Then we would have been able to say, look, okay, they are selling crude at $90 per barrel outside. We're selling it to you at 70, with the hope that when you refine, you would also take that into cognizance in determining the price you give in the market.
Thank you.
We would have been subsidizing the petroleum products without any controversy.
Thank you. I think we'll just be, we will proceed from where you're stopping now when we return from break, particularly, for example, by looking at whether or not the Dangote refinery that is coming on stream will be a game changer in this whole mess.
And the modular refineries
and the modular refineries, whether there's a way we can make them into some kind of alternative, you know, to what we have. But that is before, when we return on break. If you're just joining us, you can follow us on all our social media platforms as we discuss issues around the politics of fuel subsidy. We'll be taking just a minute break. When we return, our discussion will continue. Thank you.
I don't understand what the Nigerian economists and the members of the government, their definition of that they are subsidizing Nigerians for the oil they are buying. Who is subsidizing who? The Nigerian oil industry, petroleum industry, was developed with Nigerian capital. In fact, most of the expertise are Nigerians, if you go into the field. It's Nigerian capital, it's Nigerian oil. What I understand Nigeria should charge Nigerians is the cost of 1 barrel at the wellhead, and then the cost of transportation to the refinery, the cost of refining it, and its cost at the pump. If anybody said he is subsidizing anything, he is a fraud. So all these people talking about subsidy, who is subsidizing who?
Welcome back. This is Daily Politics on Trust TV, and we are discussing the politics of fuel subsidy. Just before we can see on screen the president as he then was as a candidate at that time. He was candidate for many years, you know. So he was saying that, you know, his trademark speech, you know, who is subsidizing who's besides the fact that there is a whole lot of difference between how the president looks now and how he looked at the time as a candidate. We can even leave that side as. Can we now say that he was not informed or sufficiently informed then as he now is? Because this is a president that is, even as early as today, as recently as today, was saying that Nigerians are going to pay the price of their not being able to remove the subsidy fully. So is it that he was being mischievous when he was saying this, or he was being uninformed?
In my opinion,
Yes.
first of all, I think you recognize the change. I think we have achieved something.
Okay.
That's a change, right?
To the president. What about Nigerians?
Okay, fine. That's fine. Let's say the president, we have achieved something.
Okay.
Yeah, there is change, right? But this is the problem. The president was Minister of Petroleum. The president built refineries and tank farms and depots
In the 70s,
all
yes.
over the country.
In
The
the 70s,
president is
yes.
not new to petroleum industry.
Yes.
I wouldn't assume he is uninformed.
Interesting.
The president's intent manifested in this discussion as General Muhammadu Buhari. The president's agenda was very clear when he assumed office in his inaugural speech. After that, something happened with Mr. President.
Okay.
And that PMB, transformation from GMB to PMB, literally became a real change of the personality, of the capacity, of the ability of Mr. President to implement his own promises and his own agenda as the leader of the government and president-elect at that time. And up to 7 years down the line, we're here discussing exactly this problem that he was discussing. And that's why when I said I was a bit harsh that time, I said we failed. Because we are exactly
important to
discussing that situation that we inherited, that people voted us to change. The scam called subsidy. Everybody referred to it as a scam called subsidy. Double billing, round tripping, dollar stripping, over billing, and over invoicing. These are parameters that are very well known in the heydays of PDP subsidy scam. We all came in to clean up this place. Today we're talking about trillions going into subsidy again. There is something fundamentally missing. The promise to ensure domestic refining becomes a public priority has been jettisoned.
Thank you. So there's this argument that this increase, this unseen, unprecedented increase in fuel subsidy costs in the country, because in between 2007 and 2015, That's about 8-year period. The total amount that was spent on subsidies was around 8 trillion naira. Today, just in 1 year, we're going to spend 3 trillion, or about 35% of what we spend in the whole of 8 years. So some people are saying this is motivated by the election year that we find ourselves, that people padding the fuel subsidy bills because they want to, because they would need money. The ruling party, the APC, your party, would need money for elections.
I wouldn't want to subscribe to that. Okay. I know that
as a party man or as a public affairs analyst, or both?
Even as a Nigerian, I wouldn't want to subscribe to that. You see, over time, the conspiracy to fleece the country of Commonwealth, our resources, had developed into a tendency that is non-partisan. You know, if you notice that when it comes to issues that have to do with corruption in this country, it has no party coloration. Everyone is involved in it. There are people.
So both the APC and the PDP
there
are
are people who there are. In fact, if I ask you, tell me who is APC and who is PDP in this system,
it's difficult to distinguish.
It's even difficult to distinguish. Some of the ministers that are pretending over some of these issues were either governors or senators in the PDP before they became APC today. So the cabal or the oil cabal or the subsidy cabal or the conspiracy cabal that perpetuates some of this very despicable hardships and crisis within the sector are just the same set of people. And that's what he was trying to tell you. That when we came as a government of APC, we should have jettisoned all of this set of people and brought in people with a vision, a clear vision to do things differently.
But that raises the question of how could that have been done?
Well, the issue is simple. We went out and campaigned on the promise of change.
Yes.
What were we thinking when we said we will change this country? What does change means? People trusted us. People believed us. Change means the first fundamental thing is the set of people.
Yes.
Because if you work with the same set of people, you will get the same set of results, which is what we are harvesting. I'm pointing out to you that a particular supervisor of our financial policy is still there intact since the days of PDP. We are getting the same financial result and getting worse. Now, to go back to how these trillions are becoming doubling or tripling.
Yes.
Remember I told you that the price of this product is dependent on the dollar. When PDP was in power, dollar was 160. Today is 3 times worse, weaker. Okay. So exactly the correlation between this doubling or tripling of subsidy.
So the more the naira weakens against the dollar,
the more you pay,
higher.
The more you pay subsidy. The more you pay subsidy, because you pay the subsidy in naira to offset the dollar cost and to offset the cost of petroleum product. Now, there is another irony in this discussion of subsidy. Everything depends on a cost of petroleum product per barrel in dollar. When the oil price crash, why are we not buying fuel cheaper?
Exactly.
Because that's what the template says. The reason is we did not deregulate. That's why deregulation is more fair than subsidy. When oil price gets to 100, you can calculate exactly 320, 350.
There was a time, sometime 2 years ago, when the current management of the NNPC, they reduced the pump price by 10 naira.
10 naira.
Only for it to shoot forward by much higher, only a few months.
So you see,
people were saying that they were just trying to play politics with Nigeria.
If you have deregulated earlier as a deliberate policy to safeguard the Commonwealth, because deregulation means that market forces will take over, like diesel have just done. You know how stable diesel is? Diesel is very stable. But the issue is, like you said, consumption volume. I'm telling you, we also have consumption behavior we can control. How many cars do I have? How many cars do you have? Every household have like 6 cars, 4 cars, 10 cars. Every individual must have a car on the road. This is not the right consumption behavior for petroleum product.
Exactly.
So deregulation will have basically contained those behaviors, which is excess. You don't need 6 cars in a household. You need maybe 1 car or 2 cars, a family car, and a main car for the head of the family.
Yes.
This is how everybody manages life all over the world.
Yes.
But we have such a very frivolous way of living that we don't account for energy consumption or our spendings on energy. That deregulation will have helped us make those adjustments, but it will have helped also bring about domestic refining capacity, and it will have helped in bringing about competition, just like telecom price was high up there, and then gradually competition brought it down. This is how it will have level up. So when you talked about NNPC reducing 10 naira, they don't have to do that in a deregulated environment, because if I go and buy cheaper, I will ensure I pass it to the people because I want to sell in a faster and more attractive way. I will compete in the market. Deregulation is what this administration need to have the courage to do. But if we deregulate today, the price will be so astronomical because the naira is weak.
That's precisely the point I'm going to say, that the regulation, as you have described it, engineer, it looks quite attractive and looks like the solution.
Yeah.
But the very argument for subsidy is because the purchasing power of Nigerians for such a very crucial commodity that everybody needs, everybody uses in one way or another, even if you don't have cars. In fact, Nigerians who don't have cars pay more for fuel than the Nigerians who do have cars, because they are the ones that the cost of higher petroleum prices are pushed onto directly by the motorists, by the keke napep people, and so on and so forth. So the very argument for subsidy is mainly for these people, to protect the incomes of these people, because if their incomes go into transportation and all that, it means that there will be less for other things, food, school fees, and so on and so forth. So if we deregulate this other part of the downstream sector now, the PMS aspect of the downstream, as we did with the AGO, what's going to happen to the common man in the street? How is he going to fare? For example, if we are going to sell it at 348 naira that the NNPC recommended last November.
You see, our problem is that as a nation, we focus our eyes in one direction all the times. We don't look at the ecosystem as being interrelated. First, we celebrate our failures, not our successes.
Interesting.
If we had had a system that functions for the interest of all, a system that is accountable, even at individual level. He made mention of the fact that some people have 6 cars, some have even 10 cars, 20 cars, very unnecessary, very wasteful. And these cars are not even they are not used for commercial purposes. They are not anything.
But those who don't have cars and they need public transport that does not exist.
I'm coming, sir. They need some adjustment. We also need a very functional public transport system.
Okay.
When our eyes are off there, we're not looking at our failures in paneling a functional public transportation system. But if we had a functional public transportation system, like in Abuja here, if we had a metro that complements the vehicles, if we had big enough, sufficient number of big vehicles that carry people, in large number from one point to the other, and
especially connecting the satellite towns to the city.
If we had a functional public transportation system, if we had functional infrastructure for intercity, not these roads that are death traps all over the place, if we had functional energy system, including power and the rest.
Electricity.
If all of our system had been very functional, this marginal increase in fuel that goes into spiral effect on all other goods and services would have been contained. But because we're looking at transportation as just road transport and even
don't see
road
the
transport
connection to other areas.
We're just excusing our failure in some other areas. So I think we need to begin to look at the ecosystem itself. How do we get a functional system within our country that protects everybody? Now, if to say we had a system that is very strict on reckless parking, for example, people would have reduced the number of cars they come into town with. But we are not. We are not. You can come and park wherever you want, and even the best of our cities like Abuja are chaotic, whatever. So we do not have a system that protects us from all these crises we are facing. And then we now focus our attention on one thing: petroleum products. We're not thinking of food prices are going up. We're not thinking of public transportation is collapsed.
That takes us to where we were heading. How would a Dangote refinery, producing or refining 600,000 barrels, 650,000 barrels on a day, how would that change the game for Nigeria and for the West African countries that our oil, our refining is even smuggled to, Cameroon and so on, our neighbors there? Yes.
Correct. So, first of all, you're not refining. You are importing and then it's smuggled.
Yes,
thank you. That's fine. So, forgive me. Let me just emphasize something very important. You see, as a
government... That's our last question, more or less.
All right. So, as a government of change,
yes,
if you sit down in a policy discussion and say, we are deregulating this industry, the advisors will say, what happened to the poor people, like you have just raised now? Then this discussion will have been in 2015 or 2016. The next thing is, let us develop a functional mass transit, because that will cushion the effect of the increase. Let us develop a functional industry that will create jobs. That is the change we promised. We have lost sight of the shift in policy that we promised. And if every time you read the inaugural speech of Mr. President, you know something has gone definitely wrong. So I will say that is where the fundamental issue is. We just replicated, copied, and allowed people to continue the policies that degenerated the economy and destroyed the currency. And we are still on a slide. Hopefully, we come back to where you are. Developing the domestic refining capacity from private sector point of view, like Dangote, will do two things. First of all, it will save us forex.
Okay.
Second of all, it will save us the jobs that we export import to other countries.
For the refining.
Dangote will employ thousands, and Nigerian money will be retained at home. But this is also private sector. He will operate on profit. Our hope is, as a petroleum engineer, I know the cost of producing a barrel is not $40. It's about $24 to $25. So if you are going to have a discussion with Dangote, you probably will say to him, you know what, I will give you this crude oil at 50. So I will double the price of production cost, meaning I still make profit. But it's our God-given natural resources. When you produce, the regulator will ensure you sell this product at a certain price. That is subsidy at source. That's what we are pointing out.
So the government will still have a role to play.
The government will just be discussing the crude price to Dangote. That's it. And because there are not many 10 Dangotes, there will be no scam. You can only take crude because you have refinery. So you could see you have reduced drastically how many people can participate in that scheme.
Thank you. So as a final question, if there are no 10 Dangotes, and there's only one, it means there are no scam. But it also means there is a monopoly. So how can that monopoly by one private sector supplier of what is not available anywhere else, except maybe by the same system we are now importing from elsewhere, how would that affect, again, the common man in the street? How would it affect the overall system?
I think he also mentioned competition. Okay. Don't forget there are also modular refineries. there's Dangote refinery. And massively, probably the government refineries may come up since they've given money.
Should they be sold, or should they?
Whatever decision is finally taken, you know, there may be competition. When Dangote went into cement production, today we have Boa, we have Dangote, and the competition is very healthy. It has led to self-sufficiency of cement in our country and even beyond. We're looking at a situation.
The price is just going up, even though you have private sector.
The price can always go up if we do not get it right at the economy level.
Okay.
What do we do to reduce, to increase the value of our currency? How do we improve our domestic economic capacity to the extent that our economy can soar up the value of our currency such that we will get dollar at far cheaper rate? We're not looking at it. These things, like I told you, is an ecosystem. If you do not get it in one area, one area will be affected. And so our economy in its totality must be improved.
So I think our economy, improving the economy in totality, is about where we come to the end. I want to thank you once again, Engineer Moazu Magaji.
Thank you.
And Saraunia for coming on the show. Thank you very much, our very own Malang Ahmed Sajo, also for coming on the show.
Thank you very much.
We hope to have you sometime next week. Thank you also for staying with us, viewers. Today we come to the end of this program. We hope to you join us same time tomorrow for another episode of Daily Politics. I am Suleiman Suleiman. Good night.